So let's now finish the topic what to measure, and we do that with looking at the forecast. Forecasting is very important because we want to know what's going to happen with the project. So let's have a look at the different forecasts. And the first forecast we are looking at is what we call the estimates at completion. What we see on the graph, first of all, we look at the green curve, which is the S curve or the cost baseline. At the end, when the project is completed, we have the budget at completion. Now we also have a status date, and that's the date where we measure earned value and actual cost. And what we do now is we extrapolate the earned value till we reach the budget at completion. So the project is finished when all value has been created, which means that the earned value is equal to the budget at completion. And here we find what we call the revised total duration. Based on this, we also extrapolate the actual cost, and we do this until we find or until we arrive at the new completion date of the project. And here we find the estimate at completion, which is basically the expected cost of the project when it is completed. When we look at the different parameters, we still have the schedule variance. We see it on the graph, EV minus PV. We have the cost variance, which is EV minus AC. We have the SPI, which is EV divided by PV. The CPI is the EV divided by AC. And the CSI is the product of the SPI and the CPI. We can make different estimates at completion. The first estimate is the project manager's estimate. The project manager is the person who understands the project the best. This means that he or she can give the real estimate of the project. Now, this is a good idea. Nevertheless, we can use some calculations, some earned value management parameters that will also help us to give an estimate based on the parameters like earned value, actual cost, and the derived parameters SPI, CPI, and CSI. A first estimate is what we call the mathematical estimate at completion. What we assume here is that we will continue the project when the CPI would be equal to 1. It means that we are completing the deliverables at the cost we estimated. We already had the actual cost that we spent. We cannot do anything without that. What is the additional value we can still earn? This is the budget at completion minus the earned value. So this will be also what we call an optimistical estimate of the estimate at completion. A second parameter is the CPI-based estimate at completion. And here we have the same formula, but now we divide by the CPI. We assume that the future performance index will be the same as the past performance index. When we looked at the mathematical estimate at completion, since we have the performance there that we are completing the work as estimated, the CPI is then equal to 1. What we have here, we use the CPI we obtained from the past performance, and we divide the remaining value to earn by the CPI. We also call this the probable estimate. And then we have the CSI-based estimate. Now we say that the future performance will be equal to the CSI or the SPI multiplied by the CPI. This is clearly a higher value, and we also refer to this as the pessimistic value. Now, when we look at two other parameters, the estimate to complete. The estimate to complete is the difference between the estimate at completion and the money already spent, the actual cost. So this is given by the formula ETC is estimate at completion minus actual cost, and we can see this on the graph also. Then we have the variance at completion. The variance at completion is a measure of budget deficit or the surplus. We see how much more do we have to pay to complete the project. And we can say that the VAC, the variance at completion, is equal to the budget at completion minus the estimate at completion. And we see that we have a negative value, which means that we're spending more. We can also look at some other parameters. We have the two complete performance index, or the TCPI. This is the cost performance index required to reach a specific budget goal. What happens at a certain moment, the management or the sponsor may say, well, this is your new budget to complete the project. Based on this, we have to, or we can evaluate what future performance we have to realize. So what is the CPI which we have to maintain to reach the new budget? And based on the TCPI, we have information to talk with the sponsor and say, well, the budget you ask or that you give us is not really realistic. Typically, when the TCPI is larger than 1, much larger than 1, when it's equal to 1 or around 1 or even less than 1, that could be a good indication that we can reach the goals without too much effort, without having a high risk not reaching that goal. We also have the different earned value parameters that we find. We have here the schedule variance, and we know there is the cost variance, the SPI, the CPI, and the CSI, but we also have the variance at completion. We have the VAC is equal to the budget at completion minus the estimate at completion, and we have the estimate to complete, which is the estimate to complete, which is equal to the estimate at completion minus the actual cost. We've seen this before, but now you see it clearly, the formulas in the graph, and you know where to find these values. When we look at regression and throughput analysis, regression analysis is a mathematical technique where input variables are compared with output variables to develop a mathematical or statistical relationship. We typically know the linear regression, and this is using the least square method. So we find some relation between different parameters, and that regression analysis gives us the possibility to estimate future performances. We also have what we call a throughput analysis. This is a method in which we assess the number of deliverables being completed in a fixed time. When we look at an adaptive approach, the throughput metrics are used to calculate the number of features completed, features remaining. We use it also to complete the velocity, the story points, the burn rates, and finally we can use them to estimate the expected completion date of the project. That was it for this paragraph about what to measure. In the next lesson, we will be looking at presenting information. It's a very important element also because there are different ways to present information, and presenting information, or the way we present information, will provide more or less information for the people who are reading that information. That's it for this lesson, folks. Great job, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next videos. Bye-bye.